Welcome to the NHL Wraparound podcast featuring Neil Smith, President General Manager of the 1994 Stanley Cup champion New York Rangers, and longtime ESPN NHL veteran Vic Morren. Together, they share no-nonsense opinions on news and issues around the National Hockey League. Whether you're a casual or diehard fan, each episode of NHL Wraparound will leave you more informed. Now, here's your hosts, Neil and Vic.
This is NHL Wraparound for Wednesday, October 15th, 2025. Vic Morren, along with Neil Smith. We're going to be sharing a lot of misery in this show today.
Yes, and it's going to start with our title of the show, which is Another Rough Start, with a play on the name of Lindy Ruff, of course, the head coach of the Buffalo Sabres. And the Buffalo Sabres are off to another tough and rough start.
We're going to be joined shortly by Buffalo News columnist Mike Harrington to get some more insight onto the plight of everything going on in Western New York. But before we do that, 3 things that you need to pay attention to. And we start with, is it a number or an integer? But nonetheless, it's 0, because the New York Rangers have started their season with no goals in each of their first 3 home games. The latest coming Tuesday evening when they were blanked by the Edmonton Oilers and Stu Skinner 2-0. So at 180 minutes, this is the longest goalless streak at home to open a season among existing teams in the NHL, and is only 7 minutes and 19 seconds off the all-time mark set by a defunct team called the Pittsburgh Pirates.
So the next home game for the Rangers is against the Minnesota Wild. And all eyes will be on that first 7 minutes and 20 seconds of the first period to see if the Rangers can pot one, because if they don't, they set a mark that they probably really don't want to set.
In a 100th anniversary season, too.
Yes, exactly. Centennial year.
You also know that I've been a Pittsburgh Pirate fan for so long, and that they have had 4 winning seasons since 1992. And for them to actually come up, of course, the hockey version, as part of this futility streak is quite something.
It really is. Just to rub a little bit of salt into Vic Morren's baseball wounds.
But to go a little bit deeper on this, Rangers played well against Washington. They played well against the Oilers. They got chances. They've run into some pretty good goaltending, but you could see where the finish is missing on this club, and that Vincent Trocheck is out, and guys are just not finding the net. And you can start with Panarin, you can go with Zibanejad, Will Cooley, and Alexis Lafreniere just has a single goal so far. So a lot of blame to spread around here.
It's not as if they've faced Marty Brodeur and Dominic Hasek and guys that have in the past just thrown shutouts against any arsenal you can put against them. Yes, Stu Skinner's a goalie that's been to the final the last 2 years in a row and backstopping Edmonton all the way to almost to the Stanley Cup. And certainly Charlie Lindgren, who threw the shutout for the Washington Capitals, was probably doing that for his brother, Ryan Lindgren, who was traded out of New York last year to Colorado, and now this year is playing for the Seattle Kraken. But, you know, the Rangers are obviously going to have to find a way to score, because if we can remind everybody, the way you win hockey games is if you get more goals than the other team gets. And it doesn't matter how well you play in all other concepts of the game. If your number above your city isn't larger than the number above the other city at the end of the game on the score clock, you lose.
What's it telling you also that the fourth line of Sam Carrick, Adam Edstrom, and Matt Rempe are getting upwards of 14 minutes a game? And they were clearly the most effective line last night, and that just can't happen.
No, it can't happen. Not if you're going to win games. Carrick was excellent in the game last night. I thought he was really, really good. The ex-Oiler played really hard against his old team. I got to admit, even Matt Rempe looked okay. Edstrom, these are big, big bodies out there and with nothing to lose. And so I think that line played a lot looser than the first two lines, who are probably squeezing the sticks until sawdust comes out of them, even though they're not made out of wood anymore.
But even so, with their size, there is something to be said about net front presence. And it's one thing to get in front of the net, but there's also the constant movement to keep the goalie screened. And while Rempe is actually in front of the net on the second power play unit, knowing what to do once you're there is an entire other story and something that we're going to lead into.
That is true. You've got to have experience and know. And I think the Rangers had a guy for a number of years who was pretty good at it.
Nice segue, because number 2, Chris Kreider, 2 goals and an assist in the Ducks home opener, a 4-3 win against Pittsburgh. Kreider getting the winner on a power play with 1:27 left. And here's the situation that a lot of people aren't mentioning this in New York, but his net front presence and that little extra that he brings is something that the Ducks are enjoying now and the Rangers traded away.
Well, yeah, and Kreider was so good in front of the net. He can tip pucks almost better than anybody in the league. Mm-hmm. He knows how to screen the goaltender. He knows how to stay out of the problems with the defenders. He's been excellent in that regard for many, many years for the Rangers, and now he's doing it out there in Anaheim, as was proven last night. So good for Chris Kreider, who joins his buddy Jacob Trouba, and they get their win in their home opener last night for Joel Kenville.
He also had an assist. I don't know how that got onto the score sheet, because Kreider is, needless to say, always very top-heavy when it comes to goals versus assists. Let's go to the other end of the ice. And in Northern California, we had mentioned on short shifts on Tuesday that Brandon Bussey might get some action with Pyotr Kochetkov on IR and the Hurricanes starting a 6-game road trip. And indeed, he was thrown to the Sharks and he responded. 16 saves, a lot of good ones. In a 5-1 win over San Jose, this is an undrafted goaltender out of Sound Beach, New York.
And I had to look up on the map and find out where Sound Beach, New York is. It sounded like Long Island, and sure enough, it is a little hamlet on Long Island, 55 miles east of UBS Arena, which means it's 55 miles east of the border of Nassau County and Queens. And it's 68 and a half miles from Madison Square Garden. So that's where he grew up, on the north shore of Long Island, near Port Jefferson, and was undrafted, as you said, and comes in with another great hockey name, Brandon Bussey.
And perhaps he's now earned himself an additional start at some point during this road trip, but a great first effort for him. And that wraps up 3 things you need to pay attention to. Now, let's have our conversation with Mike Harrington.
Well, now it's certainly a pleasure to bring on to NHL Wraparound Mike Harrington from the Buffalo News, a columnist well known in the writing circles of the National Hockey League, been doing it a long, long time. Mike, thanks for joining us and doing this.
Neil, thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure, and a lot of crazy stuff going on already here, only 3 games, and that's why you called me. It's pretty wild.
Well, we'd love to have you on no matter what their start was, but the Sabres, the team that you cover mostly in Buffalo there, is 0-3-0. And I got to ask you, the city itself and the people, the good people of the Western New York, how is the mood there? Because not only are the Sabres 0-3-0, but the Bills, who've got a real good team, a couple of back-to-back undisciplined losses to New England and Atlanta, and then the Blue Jays are sort of the adopted Major League Baseball team of the Buffalo area, and they're down 0-2 to Seattle, going to Seattle now, having blown the first 2 games in Toronto. So is it pretty abysmal in Buffalo with the mood?
It was a tough Monday for sure. The Bills situation, a couple of bad losses in a row. They go into the bye. The Blue Jays, it's funny that they've been the AAA team here since 2013. But really, most of Buffalo, the number one team is the Yankees, and the Blue Jays just, took the Yankees to the woodshed in the DS. So some people were happy. They're Blue Jays fans. The Yankee fans unhappy. And then you have the Sabres fans, passionate as ever. And boy, the situation kind of exploded here Monday afternoon against Colorado. And these people are dying, Neil. They are dying to root for a good team. Because if this team wins, they will go crazy for them. But they just can't stand seeing some of the stuff they've seen already this year.
And, it doesn't seem that long ago, Mike, that I was in the building when they were the President's Trophy team, and they had Chris Drury, and they had a really good team back then. Buffalo seemed like they were in the right spot. And then, of course, with the GOAT uniform on, they went to the final and lost to Dallas. And that was forever talked about in Buffalo. But now for 14 years, it just seems that they're just so jinxed with everything that can go wrong does go wrong. Even when they do make the right pick, number 1 overall, like Dahlin and like Power and so on, it just doesn't go right. And I got to ask you right off the top, because I'll start at the top. The Pegula family has had the team since 2011, and that happens to be 14 years ago, and their playoff drought is 14 years. Why do you think that they can't get their hockey team to come around when they've gotten their football team to come around?
Well, it's really a two-sided answer there. They've never made the playoffs here in a full season. When he made the playoffs in 2011, he bought the team in February. They got hot. They got energized and snuck in. Lost to the Flyers in 7. Haven't been back since. The Bills, that's a common question. All credit to Terry. Terry was the one who really pushed for Josh Allen to be drafted. But Terry hired a first-time coach in Sean McDermott, who brought in a first-time GM in Brandon Beane, and it happened to work. Terry picked Allen, said, go pick Allen. They agreed. And a lot of people said Allen wasn't the pick. And Allen worked out. They got kind of lucky with the Bills. They have not had a lot of luck here with the Sabres. They've made a lot of terrible decisions. But think about the tanking situation, which I abhor, and I think they still pay for in some ways. The whole premise of the organization was to tank. Why? To get Connor McDavid. Well, they didn't get Connor McDavid. They got Jack Eichel, who was a wonderful player also. But if Connor McDavid had been the pick, had they won the lottery, the coach was probably going to be Mike Babcock prior to his career blowing up when he was still legitimate. They just never figured out the plan. How do you build around Jack Eichel? And here we are 10 years later. They still haven't figured out the plan. They have still gone through coaches and GMs. No one knows what the plan is now. If you say today, what is the identity of this year's Buffalo Sabres? No one can answer the question.
So where does it start? Because Kevyn Adams has been the GM for obviously a number of years. He brings in Jarmo Kekalainen, who is running the ship over in Columbus. He comes in late May, so you're thinking, okay, maybe there's a little bit of help there that they could team up and turn this thing around. But as you just said, they've gone through coach after coach after coach. The last time they made the playoffs in 2011, it was Lindy Ruff 1.0. And since then, Ron Ralston, Ted Nolan, Dan Bosma, who won a cup in Pittsburgh, Phil Housley, Ralph Kruger, Don Granato. Oh, and here we are back at Ruff 2.0, as if they're trying to capture that magic from 14 years ago. And I think the reality is, and you're going to answer this one, I think, with some pretty sharp tongues attached to it, how much patience is fair?
I don't know. I mean, you're at the point now where the fan base has lost patience with this team 3 games into the season. We had a jersey on the ice the other day. We had the Fire Kevin chant. Most people are pointing at Kevyn Adams. He's been the GM here for 6 years. Most people aren't pointing at Lindy Ruff. And one of the issues with Kevyn Adams, Terry Pegula loves him. Terry Pegula loves the direct line to the GM. There's no president of hockey here like there should be to bring another set of eyes. But we've always said, well, if he fires Kevyn Adams, who's he going to hire? Well, lo and behold, for the first time, really, they have a ready-made solution in-house. It's pretty clear that the GM here probably needs to be Jarmo Kekalainen sooner rather than later, but they're very sensitive to that. They were sensitive to it the day they hired him, understandably so, because I don't think they thought they'd be in this position 2 weeks before Halloween. But here we are, and Adams has lost the fan base. I think he's lost the locker room. And here's the thing, guys. Season opener this year, run all the coaches out on the bench. You run the non-players out there. They didn't introduce Kevyn Adams like it did last year before the home opener because he got booed last year. And they knew he'd get booed this year. And if you don't want to introduce the GM before the season opener because you're worried he's going to get booed, I think the relationship is fractured with the fan base beyond repair. And the fan base wants to see somebody else in the chair.
Where are you with the coach? Because Lindy Ruff, needless to say, one of the winningest coaches in the history of the National Hockey League.
Yeah.
But last year, got off to an 0-3 start. The club actually did get above 500, and then that 13-game winless skid hit, and that was, for all intents and purposes, the end of the season. Is he really the right guy for the players that they have currently on their roster?
Well, we're going to see. Last year, there was a bit of a mulligan there. They had to go to Europe. They didn't have a real training camp. The 13-game winless streak, Dahlin got hurt, missed 9 of the games. The players in Ruff weren't really on the same page. The players didn't know there were going to be in-game adjustments. You know, that's what coaches do, but it hadn't really been done before. And we saw at the end of the year, this team finished 12-7-1. They finished 14-3 in their last 17 home games last year. Now, I liked what I saw, but the cynic says, well, there was no pressure on them at that point, so it was easy to play. So you come back this year, and now the pressure's back. Everybody's 0-0, and training camp goes okay. You know, and everybody's dying to cheer for this team, and the building is full on opening night. You get shut out. Josh Norris gets hurt. He's out 8 weeks. I mean, how different would it have felt if they just lost the game 6-4? They get shut out by the Rangers 4-0. Norris is out. The whole lineup is askew now. And now Ruff has to try to figure it out. He's 65 years old. And, you know, he's got a lot of young players on this team. You wonder how they connect, how they mesh. What kind of system do they play? You know, Ruff wants them to work harder. Every coach wants that. But I don't know if it's in some of these guys' DNA. You know, and some of the things we're seeing out here, you would say, and Neil would know this, you would say this is a team trying to get somebody fired. Now, normally, that means they're trying to get the coach fired. In this case, I think this is a team trying to get the GM fired, because that's what they look like. They look like they've lost all faith in the front office.
Incredible. And, you know, the one thing that we've got to give them the truth about is that they did start off with a lot of injuries. Their number one goaltender, Luukkonen, he's out again. He was out early, and they've had to play Alex Lyon all 3 games.
Who has been the MVP of the team so far, for the record.
Okay. Well, and he actually did a real good job for Florida when he was down in Florida, and did an admirable job for Detroit. Matthias Samuelsson out. And then in the Norris situation, I mean, it was pretty well known that his shoulders weren't good when they got him. A lot of teams knew that, and you have to wonder why they made that deal. I'm not going to criticize it, but there are a lot of deals that have been made by the Sabres that are head scratching. And there's always a reason. If you talk to the manager later, he will give you legitimate reasons why he made the trade. So I want to say that right up front, and that's why I'm trying not to be negative about it. But the Peterka trade, I did a Utah radio station last season all year long from home. I did it once a week. And Kesselring is a good guy. And Doan is Shane Doan's son. That's about the end of that. And I was blown away when they traded JJ Peterka there. And then you can go into other trades with Eichel. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I'm sure it's been beaten enough in Buffalo. But you end up with the only player that you really got out of that is Alex Tuck, who's a real good player. He's a very good player. And Krebs is Krebs. And there has been a lot of questionable moves.
Sure. I mean, I look at the Peterka thing. There are reasons for some of them, but, you know, Peterka Peterka's not a Lindy Ruff player. He just isn't. Defensively, he was brutal here last year. There was a clip when they played Utah of a goal. He did an ole on the defenseman at the blue line. The defenseman goes in, feeds the puck down low for a goal. The defenseman was Kesselring, who made that play. I expect Peterka to be a 30-plus goal guy in Utah. The Sabres felt that they would become better defensively. They were 10th in the league in goals last year. They were 29th in goals against. We got to be better defensively. Okay. They needed to get a right-handed guy in here to be Power's partner. Okay, they got Kesselring. Doan, hard-nosed, better defensively. Okay. If you subtract some goals, it's not going to hurt us that much because we got Norris, we got Kulik, we got Jack Quinn will add some goals. Kesselring will get some goals. Dahlin will score a little more. There was a lot of hope here. And at the end of last year, Jason Zucker gave us a great quote, Neil. Jason Zucker said to us, hope is a lousy, I'll use the word to not quote him directly. Hope is a lousy strategy. Well, the Sabres had a lot of hope coming into this season, and a lot of their hopes aren't coming in right away. And, you know, the ultimate irony would be coming this week with the disaster coming. Who are they playing Wednesday night? They're playing the Ottawa Senators. Who are they playing Saturday? They're playing the Florida Panthers. Imagine 2 more losses with a combined 3 or 4 goals from Dylan Cousins and Sam Reinhart this week. How much more the Heat would turn up on the Buffalo Sabres. It's just unbelievable. And, I mean, they have had bad luck. They've had stupidity all over the place. But who would think a lot of teams trade top players? Who would think all these guys would go win Stanley Cups? O'Reilly, Reinhardt's won 2, Montour, Eichel. It's unbelievable how many Stanley Cups have been traded off the Buffalo Sabres roster since about 2019.
Well, and then not to mention, I thought of this just the other day when the Eichel deal was announced. 12.5, I believe, a year. And
13.
13 and a half.
13,
yeah.
13 and a half
13
a year.
Yeah.
And this was a Buffalo Sabres player. I mean, and now he's a $13.5 million superstar in Vegas.
He was a star here. He was a $10 million player who finished 8th in the Hart Trophy balloting in 2019-20 for the Buffalo Sabres. Yeah, he was the captain. He was the face of the franchise. But, you know, they couldn't make it work. They couldn't come to an agreement on the medical situation. He was frustrated by the losing, but the medical situation, and I get it. You know, let's not go crazy here. There were plenty of other teams in the league telling the Buffalo Sabres, you are in the right, don't let him do it. We control medical situations of players.
Yeah.
They had plenty of teams telling them, don't do it. They're
Right.
not necessarily the villain. They were doing the right legal thing. They weren't doing the moral thing. They were doing the legal thing. Jack was just brilliant in the way he researched the situation, got consultants, researched the impact on his body. There are players in this league for decades going forward who should thank Jack Eichel for the way he advocated for himself in that situation. And a lot of players need to do that. And I think everyone on both sides in the league are going to forever look back at that case when it comes to medical things. And that really fractured the relationship. And from there, now you've got to retool the team, and you got Power and Dahlin and Thompson and Tuck, but they're not Jack Eichel. But having said all that, too, how much did Jack Eichel win here?
Before I let my partner get in here, let me ask you one thing, because I like to try to be positive. What is, for you yourself, Mike, watching this team, how do you see this turning around? What has to happen to get this to turn around?
Well, the first thing is your top players have to be your top players. They've got 2 goals so far. The goal in the Colorado game was Thompson from Dahlin and Tuck. That was the first point for all 3 of them. If your top players don't play, you can't win. They have to score. Let's not forget here, guys, what team in the NHL leads the league in 5-on-5 goals over the last 3 years cumulatively? It's the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah.
Wow.
No one would think that.
Yeah.
They suffer because their power play's been terrible. If these guys can't be their best players, they can't win. And Luukkonen was their starting goalie, wasn't good last year. They can't win. Their top guys, look at the tape of Colorado's second goal, Dahlin, just with an awful turnover. And that's one of the issues here. There's plenty of talent. There's more talent on this team now than there's been in the last 10 years. And there's more depth. if they're all healthy, the defense core should be better. But if your players don't play, and they play like we've seen these first 3 games, this team's going nowhere.
I look at this lineup, and as you said, I think goaltending, defense is not bad. They were a great first period team last year also, which I think flies under the radar for a lot of people in terms of their goal scoring.
Number one in the league at first period goals.
But this year, 2 goals, as you'd mentioned, in 3 games.
Yeah.
I know on Monday, the mindset was to try to load up on top with Thompson and Tuck and Doan. And I guess if Benson is able to play, he'll move on to that top line. But then I looked at the rest of their line combos. I don't see the talent lining up with the rest of the league. Essentially, and I told Neil this, they have the components of a first line, and they've got 9 bottom 6 forwards. And I think that's where the offensive problem comes, when you put the Sabres forwards in relation to other clubs in the National Hockey League.
Well, the one thing is, you look at the game Monday, you're missing 3 of your top 9 forwards. You don't have Norris, you don't have Benson, and you don't have Greenway. They're all in your top 3 lines. They're all not there. So partly I take 3 of my top 9 out of any team, and they're going to suffer. But yeah, they are a top-heavy team, and I think we're seeing that more in the league anyway. If your top 6 don't score, you're not going to win. The injuries have been a big factor. You know, their talent level, they got a lot of nice prospects in the organization. What are you going to do? Call up Consta Helenius now and put him, he's 19, put him in the middle of this crisis situation? No, I don't want to do that. It's on the veterans to perform. It's on the veterans to get this team out of it, to will themselves to a win here. You know, especially, okay, you can't guard Nathan McKinnon very well. I get it, whatever, he's Nathan McKinnon. Can you please show up at home against the Brady Tkachuk-less Ottawa Senators? That, to me, should be a very minimum standard here.
Mike, I just want to go back to the 3 forwards that you had mentioned there in Greenway, Norris, and Benson. In reality, of those 3, which are top 6 forwards around the rest of the National Hockey League?
Well, a healthy Norris can be a first-line guy. I mean, he's scored 35 goals in this league.
Okay.
If he's healthy. Benson is on the first line.
Okay.
Did a lot of good things with Thompson last year. He's not a first-line player. He's a second-line player. Greenway's a second or third-line player. And you could say that Greenway's absence is felt more on the penalty kill, and their PK has been good this year without him anyway. He's not going to score a lot, but he's physical. I think the problem is they traded for Norris. He's their number 1 center. He makes $7.9 million. Has 5 more years left in his deal, and he can't stay healthy. 1 game. He can't even get through 1 game. I mean, I feel bad for the guy, and this isn't a shoulder problem either. My understanding is this is a torn oblique. But he was taking a face-off, and he tears an oblique, and he's going to be out 8 weeks. I mean, that's like franchise devastating. That's like GM fireable. That's like fire your medical staff for approving the trade. You know, and it's just unbelievable these things happen. I mean, they can't even get through the opening game of the season without disaster happening, and that's what really strikes them down. And there's a pall in the locker room because these guys, A, legitimately like Norris, and B, they saw what he was in camp and preseason when he looked great, and they're like, this guy's one of our best players, and now we're going to see him maybe before Christmas.
It's really...
You're stupefied by it all. Really, so am I.
Yeah, I mean, and Mike, that's why we wanted to talk to you, because we can't figure it out from our vantage point sitting here. You know, you analyze these teams before the season starts. You look at their acquisitions, you look at the people they lost, and then you make a decision. Are they better or worse on paper? And I think for me, I was thinking that they might be a little bit better because, you know, they're finally going to get it at some point. And it's even frustrating from a neutral standpoint to see the Sabres start off so poorly and do it again. And, you know, you've got to think back to the number of players that have Stanley Cup rings. Obviously, none of them with Buffalo, because Buffalo has never won the Stanley Cup. I'm not saying this to rub it in, and I'm not saying this to be somebody who says what an awful job anybody's done. But you got to scratch your head when you see Sam Reinhart, Evan Rodriguez, Dmitry Kulikov, Kyle Oposo, Jack Eichel, Will Carrier, Ryan O'Reilly, And he also won the Conn Smythe, by the way. And then Zach Bogosian, who was a third overall pick to Buffalo. People forget about that. I can only imagine the frustration.
Now, some of those guys were lousy here. I mean, let's not get carried away with Kulikov and Zach Bogosian, even though they count. Okposo was just a straight deadline trade. He wanted to go chase one before he retired. Okay, the rest of them are a joke. I mean, they wouldn't give Sam Reinhart a long-term deal. Okay, O'Reilly lost his love for the game. Well, Ray Ferraro made a point that year going into the World Championships. They should have just told O'Reilly, go play in the World Championships, win a gold medal, get your head and your body ready and be ready in September. They didn't have to trade him, but ownership freaked out about what he said, and they dumped him. Now they get Thompson for him, good on Botterill for picking the right prospect from St. Louis, but he becomes the first guy in the history of the league to get traded and win the Conn Smythe Trophy the next year. All the Buffalo Sabres luck, you know? I mean, it's just unbelievable. You could form a tremendous all-star team of ex-Sabres here, and that's the fear now. If this team goes belly up and Thompson wants out or Dahlin wants out or Tuck doesn't sign the extension, part of me says, you know what, you fire the GM, you tell Thompson and Dahlin, you got a long-term deal, you're the faces of the franchise, you're going to stay and figure it out. We're not dumping you, we're not trading you, we're not getting anybody for you that's going to be as good as you are. At some point, somebody has to show some backbone here and say to the players, get your butts in there and figure this out. We'll get you front office people to help you, but you're the face of the Sabres. You're not going anywhere.
So we're starting at ground zero. Let's just say this first week never happened, and it's going to be baby steps. What do those baby steps look like? Small goals that this team can achieve that will give the optic that there is some traction there. There's a very long way to go. There's a lot of bubble clubs in the Eastern Conference. So it's not like you turn around, you win 4 or 5 in a row. You're sitting right there in the bubble and maybe even on the correct side of the line. But what do those baby steps look like for this team to start to move it forward?
Two things jump out at me. The first we saw against Colorado, show up from the opening faceoff. They didn't do that in the first 2 games at all. They were outshot 16-1 in Boston. Now, against Colorado, the shots were Buffalo's favor, 11-4, and the play was in Buffalo's favor, too, until Nathan McKinnon made a world-class play and scored the first goal. Okay, we get that. The other thing is they have to figure out, with this kind of talent in this team, Dahlin, Tuck, Thompson, Zucker, Power, Kulik, all the names you know, what is the problem with the power play? Why can't this team put together a good power play? They're 0 for 11 right now. I think there's only 3 teams left who are 0 for. And you don't score on the power play in this league, you lose. You know, your power play gets you goals and it gets you positive momentum when you don't score. And they can't
Mike,
do that.
Is that too much puck movement? Or are they supposed to go back to one of the oldest things in the book when your power play stinks? Get it to the point, rip it, send people to the net. So is there over puck handling or is the execution breaking down elsewhere?
Sometimes there's not good retrievals in the zone. Sometimes they're not breaking out of their own zone well. The retrievals are an issue. The other thing is they just don't go to the net enough. You know, why does every power play have to be a pretty one-timer from the flank? Why can't you just go to the net, crash the net, and get a dirty goal? The Buffalo Sabres just don't score enough dirty goals. And especially on the power play, that's where a guy like Doan can come in handy. He can crash the net and help out in that kind of situation. But to me, every night, 0 for 3, 0 for 4 on the power play, you lose. You lose. And we went through this the last couple of years watching this team going, when are you going to fix this? Seth Appert is the assistant coach who's very highly regarded. Kevyn Adams came from Rochester. He hasn't figured out the power play. Dahlin is sick of talking about it. We're sick of asking Dahlin about it. You know, I feel for some of these guys having to hear these questions all the time. We're sick of asking them. Do something different. You know, but to me, right away against Ottawa, I need to see power play goals, and I need to see them show up from the opening faceoff. Those would be 2 big steps. Maybe they've got one kind of fixed Monday, but until the other one gets, it's going to be a talking point every game.
Mike, it is befuddling to say the least, and we are glad you came on and helped us unbefuddle it a little bit. But there is some stuff that I've learned from you in talking today that really I didn't take into consideration about the Sabres, and we'll see what happens going forward.
Scary schedule.
But I do think that the league needs the Sabres to be better. We just do. It's not a fun league when one team is bad every year for 14 straight years. So I really hope that they can turn a corner at some point. But nevertheless, thanks for all the work you do and coming on here and sharing some of your insights.
Gentlemen, it's a pleasure. And when you're talking Ottawa, Florida, Montreal, Detroit, Toronto, it's going to be pretty interesting and ugly 2 weeks potentially. Thanks for having me.
Well, hopefully it won't be ugly. Hopefully they'll turn a corner somehow, but we'll wait and see.
Thanks very much.
Mike Harrington, not at a shortage for words in terms of criticizing the Buffalo Sabres franchise, but also, quite frank, in terms of what he sees as needs for improvement here. And these are things that have to happen quick.
They do. And Mike Harrington is a Buffalo born and raised American and wants his team to do well, wants all the teams in Buffalo to do well. So he's not criticizing them because he wants to get a knife out and carve. I learned a lot from listening to Mike and seeing what Mike had to say about the Sabres and their plight, as you said, is a good word to use because it is quite a plight. And it's hard to believe that with all the great draft picks, positions that they've had, that they can't get enough improvement and get the right combination going to be a playoff team.
I thought he summed up not only where they are, but where they need to get to so concisely and with just the right amount of edge on everything.
Oh, yeah. And, he's a columnist. He's been around a long time, and it's not because he's afraid to say what he thinks. And he was a really good interview.
Other side of the spectrum, as we move to some other items, there is some good stuff in the soup in Montreal. Last night, a 5-4 overtime victory over the Seattle Kraken. Ivan Demidov with the game-tying goal. Electrifying move in front with 2:41 left. And then in the overtime, Lane Hudson, a little bit of magic, handing the puck off to Caulfield, who went short side on Joey Decord. Something pretty good going on in Montreal.
And Demidov had a electrifying assist on the first goal of the game when Montreal took the 1-0 lead. So, there's some excitement in Montreal. There's some really talented guys there now. It could end up being a very much of a fun year for the Montreal Canadiens, a bubble team along with the Buffalo Sabres. And you talk about going from misery in Buffalo to joy in Montreal, that they think that maybe they're crawling out of that bubble space and going to be a real legitimate playoff team. Whereas in Western New York, it looks just like more of the same.
What's it telling you in terms of the belief of this franchise from ownership coming on down that Jeff Gorton and GM Ken Hughes have been extended as well?
Deservingly so. I mean, when Jeff Gorton went there as president of hockey operations, and then later they hired Kent Hughes, the former agent, to come in and be GM. Kent Hughes speaks French, which I think was one of the big reasons why he was brought in. Jeff Gorton perhaps would have been GM if he spoke French, but Jeff Molson, the majority owner of the Montreal Canadiens, felt that you needed to have a French-speaking general manager. And so the combination of Gorton and Hughes has been excellent. It's a results-driven business. So the results are there. They deserve what they got as far as an extension.
Let's go west, young man. In the Vegas-Calgary game on Tuesday, Golden Knights goaltender Adin Hill exited after the first period. He took a shot to the head, but the team is calling it a lower body injury. And then at the other end of the ice, Dustin Wolf, with his fourth straight start of the season. Flames could not hold the lead in the third period. Jack Eichel had 2 goals in that game, a 4-2 win for Vegas. But I think the bigger question here, during the course of our summer coolers, we had noted that the backup goaltending situation in Calgary was going to be critical. because Dan Vladar left. He's now in Philadelphia. Devin Cooley is the backup. He has not played since 2024 when he was a member of the San Jose Sharks. So you got to think that Ryan Husk is a little bit queasy about getting him in net. But quite frankly, he's going to have to, because I don't see Wolf being able to play 65 games and the Flames remain in contention with him having to absorb any kind of workload that would be close to that.
Well, tonight in Salt Lake City for the Utah Mammoth home opener, and the first time that the Mammoths will play in Salt Lake City, because last year they were called the Utah Hockey Club. Devin Cooley will, in fact, start in goal for the Calgary Flames, who are playing in a back-to-back situation, having played, as you said, last night in Calgary versus the Vegas Golden Knights. So it's funny, because is Devin Cooley being thrown to the Wolves? Because the starter is Dustin Wolf. No, but we'll see what he can do. It's not a real fair situation. You're coming in on the second night of a back-to-back to play your first game of the season, and the Utah club will naturally really be wanting to win their home opener. But we'll get a look at Devin Cooley tonight against the Utah Mammoth.
Brandon Bussey did it, so now it's Devin Cooley's turn. By the way, before we drop this item, at least we can put to bed the thought that Wolf would start every game this season. You remember in 95-96 when Grant Fuhr started the first 76 games for the Blues under a somewhat volatile head coach that was ready to let him go the entire season?
Mike Keenan, the one and only, started Grant Fuhr. I think he thought that he was playing in the original six and he had Glenn Hall. But yeah, and poor Grant, by this point in his career, I mean, that just wore him down by the end of that 95-96 season. And that was the year that they were eliminated by Detroit on the famous Steve Yzerman slap shot that beat the St. Louis Blues. And John Casey, that's right. And, of course, Wayne Gretzky, by that time, was on that St. Louis Blues team.
Actually turned the puck over at center ice to Yzerman. But even going back before that, Fuhr wasn't in the net, obviously, because he was lost in the first round of the playoffs after Nick Kyprios fell on him after he was cross-checked by Chris Pronger and his knee went to hash. So that great plan of having Fuhr carry that club went down in flames pretty quickly.
It did, all because of another NHL wraparound one-time guest, Nick Kyprios of Stanley Cup lore from the New York Rangers in 1994.
You know who else we've got to get on NHL wraparound, and sooner than later, is Brent Burns, who celebrated his 1,500th career game on Saturday in a 5-4 loss to Dallas, that one coming in a shootout. But before the game, his Avalanche teammates celebrated him by wearing tank tops into the arena. And of course, you know that the fashion statements have been loosened a little bit, or the attire has been a little bit loosened, more for expression. So the Avalanche players coming in tank tops, blue tank tops, with Burns' likeness and a 1,500 on them. Defenseman Devon Taves had a backpack, kind of one of Burns' signature when he was walking into the rink. And to give this some perspective of what his marks are in terms of games played and also the consecutive game streak. He's played all 4 games so far this season, 2 assists plus 1, 20 minutes and 8 seconds of ice time in the high altitude. He has played 929 straight games as of this recording. He would tie Phil Kessel's all-time record of 1,064 in Game 57 next season. Of course, he'll be an unrestricted free agent at the end of this season, so we'll see if he's still playing. But when you talk about certain athletes, you know, and you hear the terms generational player thrown out there, and this guy's a specimen. This guy's a specimen.
He's been a terrific player since he broke into the league with the Minnesota Wild and has been an amazing guy. I know Brent. He's a great guy. He's just is a specimen. we've talked to Chris Chelios. We've commented on his great career and the way he kept his body in shape and kept going. Brent Burns is just like that. I mean, he's an animal as far as working out, keeping himself in shape. And he signed for $1 million with the Colorado Avalanche on a 1-year deal. And I said to you before, I said, if you're going into one game, you're going to have one game. Do you want to have Keandre Miller or Noah Dobson, or we can name other very, very wealthy younger defensemen? Or would you like to have Brent Burns? I'll go with Brent Burns right now.
I want him on this show.
We'll get him.
All right. Any other news?
Yeah, one news item here that's a little bit scary to read, and that is that the captain of the Chicago Blackhawks, Nick Foligno, is taking a leave of absence while his daughter has surgery. So we certainly wish Nick and the Foligno family the best of luck, and hopefully the operation goes really well for his daughter, whatever it is. In the Detroit Red Wings, their star player Lucas Raymond will not play tonight, but he is close to coming back to the lineup. So that's good news that he's close, but Detroit's got to start getting some wins. And they did well against Toronto, but they got to keep it going.
And that's where Raymond was hurt when he was hit into the boards by defenseman Chris Tanev. Before we wrap up the show, a little bit of human side stuff. We had, of course, a very enlightening discussion with Mike Harrington from the Buffalo News, and a lot of that conversation was wrapped around the way this club has been constructed by general manager Kevyn Adams, who, as Mike had shared, was booed. They're calling for him to be fired. He wasn't even announced prior to the opening night roster being announced to the fans in Buffalo when they opened against the Rangers last Thursday. From that GM seat, and perhaps this was much different for you because I think in a lot of Ranger fans' eyes, you got a lifetime hall pass from any sort of real criticism in terms of your job because you delivered something that only Lester Patrick has done in the history of the franchise. But if you're Kevyn Adams, can you tune this out and still really do your job effectively? I mean, where does that tipping point come where you said, you know what, either fire me or I've got to resign because it's just too much?
Well, it also has an effect on your family, and that's another thing. So I don't know his situation, kids and wife and all the rest of it, but it does definitely have an effect on them. I never had people chanting for me to get fired. I never had really many things written even about me to get fired. There was a couple, but it's hard to tune that out. And particularly when you know that you've tried a lot of different things and it's just not working. It's not like there's a real reason here why it's not working. Yes, they've had injuries, but come on, 0-3 again this year. Like, this is tough. This is tough stuff. So I'm sure he's struggling with it mentally, but you gotta try to put it on the back burner and go ahead and do your day-to-day work.
Wednesday's game certainly going to be pivotal against, as Mike had mentioned, the Brady Tkachuk-less Ottawa Senators, because the run of games after this within the Atlantic Division in particular gets all the more difficult. So we'd like to thank Mike for his time today and much appreciated for the words that he shared with us.
You know what? We also want to thank the listeners. Send your questions or comments to either me or Vic, Neil at NHLWraparound.com or Vic at NHLWraparound.com. You know what? Try to support our sponsors, Lugaru Apparel, of which we both got on their apparel here, UBS Financial Services, Inc., that take care of money matters for you. Without sponsors, we can't keep doing this. And so please try to support them. NHLWraparound.com is up and running. We really like it. Stu Young's website that he did for us. Smith's Picks and Neil's Nuggets and New York Centric are all three new additions to the website. So take a look at the website and enjoy.
We had a pretty good night with Smith's Picks on Tuesday.
Yeah, I got a little bit lucky there. What was it again?
It was 5-0, in case you needed to be reminded.
5-0. And what's my record so far? I can't remember.
You're well over 500. Well over 5. You've easily doubled your amount of wins over losses.
So in
people have to go on and check.
Yeah, go on. That's right. Go on and check. And by the way, if you want some help, if you're a betting person, take a look at my picks, take a look at my record, and then decide whether or not you want to go with what I'm saying.
I was giving you every opportunity to pump your own tires here, and you certainly did that. Our next shows, we're going to have short shifts on Friday and next Monday. Our next wraparound, Wednesday, October the 22nd, when we look forward to speaking with the longtime radio voice of the Toronto Maple Leafs, who will be retiring after this season, Joe Bowen. And he is a character. And if there's any reason to pull for the Maple Leafs, Neil, it would be to be able to hear him actually call the Leafs winning the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, and that's something that, of course, you remember Foster Hewitt, and I'm not sure in '67 if it was Bill Hewitt, Foster's son, who called that game, but it was a Hewitt for sure. But there's been no other names ever call a Stanley Cup winning game. So it would be nice if Joe either gets to do it this year in his last year, or maybe in the future, if they're on the verge of winning at some time, they'll call Joe and say, come on in and call the last 5 minutes of the winning game. Hopefully he gets a chance to do that. But I'm really looking forward to this show with Joe Bowen. He's quite a character and really a knowledgeable guy.
Keep tuning in, folks, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for joining us on the NHL Wraparound Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on all the NHL action.